So what is classic liberal theology, and how does it relate to Friedrich Schleiermacher? So I tried filming this video a while ago, and it did not go well. It was a train wreck because my daughter was being absolutely feral. You want to help Daddy? Come here. Oh, Miss Jade's gonna help. Oh no. Jade, no. Oh yes, thank you. No, I'll read it to you now. Oh! Hey! Oh! Hey! Do you want to stand? So you ask anyone what a liberal theology is, and you're likely to get a whole bunch of different answers. Someone may ask if it has something to do with politics in America, particularly maybe with the Democratic Party. Maybe it's some kind of socialism. All of this is actually wrong. You hear a lot of discussions of people now, some conservative movements fighting against liberal theology. In particular, I think of like Redeem Zoomer, his famous Reconquista movement to retake the mainline denominations from theological liberalism. The problem is that a lot of us don't even really know what theological liberalism actually is. And you kind of need to know what theological liberalism is to know what these denominations have been overtaken by. A lot of these denominations are actually more into just social justiceness and wokeness and just following party lines of the Democratic Party or the liberal agenda rather than what theological liberalism actually is. It's obviously heavily influenced by theological liberalism, but that doesn't mean that's necessarily what is actually overtaken by. It originated particularly with theologians like Friedrich Schleiermacher, and I'm going to mispronounce that a million times and probably going to pronounce it a different way each and every time. I did consult a pronunciation guide before this video, and I still don't have it down. You ask a modern dispensationalist what theological liberalism is, and they're probably going to tell you that it's anyone who doesn't interpret the Bible literally. The problem with this definition is that it doesn't really fully encapsulate what theological liberalism is. I mean, obviously, there are many different interpretations to the Bible and how we look at the Bible to interpret it in light of the hermeneutic that we bring to it, our preconceived biases. Just because someone doesn't understand it literally, which would be like a premillennial hermeneutic, say an amillennial hermeneutic, or maybe even a postmillennial hermeneutic. These are just different ways of interpreting the Bible. That doesn't mean necessarily that it's liberal, and the people that are outside of theological liberalism look and hold Scripture to just as high in regard as a premillennial would. From The Journey of Modern Theology, I've quoted this a lot on this channel. Very good book. Encourage you to get it. On page 126, liberal theology is best defined as maximal acknowledgement of the claims of modern thought within Christian theology. It began as a movement and a type of theology within Protestantism in Europe, but later it extended into some sectors of Catholic theology where it has traditionally been called modernism. In other words, it is not just any revision of traditional doctrine, it is a revision and reconstruction of Christian doctrine in the light of modernity, with the best of modern thought serving as both source and norm for doctrinal critique and construction. He fell back asleep. We're doing good, guys. Being influenced by culture isn't necessarily a new thing in lights of theology. I mean, Thomas Aquinas, he canonized into doctrine the philosophy of Aristotle, influenced what is known as scholasticism, and the systems of theology that all the church fathers, they were very heavily influenced by their cultural surroundings. But the difference between this and that of liberalism is the means of accommodation, meaning that liberalism didn't just be influenced by the Enlightenment, by modernity and the philosophies that were coming out of those things, but they were completely changed and completely accommodated to these philosophies rather than just simply being influenced by them. And this is what completely changed the theological landscape. A classical liberal theology ran primarily from 1799 to 1914. Immediately after 1914, you can kind of imagine what changed in world history that caused the theological landscape to change, but I will leave that to the viewer's guess. The Journey of Modern Theology has several points that define what theological liberalism is, and I'm going to list those. The first being, it must use modernity stemming from Enlightenment thought as authoritative in theological matters. This means that we don't just look at the Enlightenment as something that influenced, kind of like how as a Protestant I would look at church history as something that can help interpret and influence my thought, but it's not as authoritative as the scriptures themselves. The liberal theology would look at modernity and the findings of humanity as being more authoritative than anything that we can get from previous revelation. The second being that it's anthropocentric and optimistic about human potential. And this is a clear hermeneutic that liberal theology uses. It is very man-centered. It is always focused on our interactions with God, not God's dealing with us. And it's very optimistic about the human potential, believing that we're going to be moving towards a greater utopia, in a sense, as we go further and further in human history towards that perfect life. It's interesting because, like I said, this theological movement kind of ended around 1914 with the events that happened directly after that made people very much question that idea of optimism towards human potential, but I'll save that for another video. Point 3 would be that theology from above versus from below. And I have a quote here on page 129. So from above means accepting the authority of special revelation from God and interpreting it with the intention of constructing sound Christian doctrine. From below means beginning theological reflection with human experience and attempting to determine from that what can and should be believed. Liberal theology endeavors to discover knowledge about God from universal human experience. This does not mean rejecting revelation from above, but it does mean submitting that revelation to the criterion of human experience as its judge. So again, going back to the anthropocentric viewpoint, it's very man-centered, and it's very centered on that Enlightenment thought of thinking that we are moving towards something and that we are the starting point, not God being the starting point. The fourth point, and that final point, is that the Bible itself is subject to criticism. It's thought of more as a Christian classic and not as something that is seen as fully authoritative, or the modern idea of the Bible being inerrant, or maybe the classical idea of it being infallible. All of these things are not seen as true or found to be true, especially in light of Enlightenment and modernistic philosophy. So that has been tossed to the wayside in favor of it being thought of as just like a classic that we can get knowledge from, but maybe necessarily not doctrine. So back to Friedrich Schleiermacher. He is considered the father of classical liberal theology. He is a hero of the faith for liberal theologians, and his funeral in Berlin, as attested by Olson, could have been attended by possibly tens or hundreds of thousands of people. His entire theology was to reconstruct Christianity in light of modernity in a way that it would withstand all future attacks against it. His magnum opus work is a systematic theology, it's Christian faith. He wrote that from 1821 to 1822. It had a couple different editions. I actually currently with me have the 2-volume right here. I just received those. Excited to read them. It's considered by some to be the greatest systematic since Calvin. We'll talk about a Christian faith here again in a second. But back to an overview of Schleiermacher. Schleiermacher's entire theology is rooted in personal experience rather than a systematic doctrine. Human experience, which is his starting point, it starts there. And from there, he stated that people have an immense calling towards God found deep within themselves, and that religion is fundamental to human nature. This creates a religion that doesn't rely on any rational proof, but it's something that's found inside of us intrinsically. It's not something acquired or something we can find, but it's just built in. The religion is something that he called piety, and it is what we experience as humans when we feel a part of something greater. So for example, this idea of feeling a part of something greater would be seeing beauty in the world, that we can collectively look at things like Niagara Falls and think of the beauty, or look at the immense work of some particular group of people in fighting for liberation or fighting for the betterment of society. It's the advancement of modern medicine. It is the freedoms which we all espouse. These are all things that are outside of science, outside of morality. Religion, it's something different. For his theology, Schleiermacher also found theology and dogma to be nothing more than a reflection on this human experience. So it's a product of religion, but it is not the foundation of it. It's also subject to change based on human experience. If human experience changes, so does the theology to reflect such change. So what about God? Well, for Schleiermacher, God is infinite, and because of this, he's absolutely unknowable. He is the infinite being outside of anything that we can describe. He stated that all talk, all discussion that we can have about God is in essence a discussion of our human experience of him. So to actually describe God would be to take away from his infiniteness, which would be lowering his standards. He considered this God to be an omnicausality, that God is the cause of all things. This actually includes sin. He most likely did not believe in miracles and rejected the power of prayer simply because this would mean that God is changing something that he's already set in place and would be lowering his omnicausality. As the Journey of Modern Theology states on page 141, this is further than even Calvinists take it. Supernaturalness is also unnecessary because God and the world are independent as he is already caused. He also rejected the Trinity, seeing that it was just useless dogma that didn't make sense. So obviously, in light of all this, he rejected traditional doctrines such as the hypostatic union, such as the resurrection. These were illogical and impossible in light of modern discoveries. So Jesus Christ, for he was fully human, the only difference, he was the fully met potential of God consciousness given to him by God to recognize God's work in his life, to recognize that beauty, that God consciousness that he has known, that feeling of piety towards human achievement. So in essence, Jesus is an ideal. He is the ideal human, the perfect human with that fully endeavored God consciousness, that fully met potential of piety towards meaning. Anyone, in essence, could do this. It's not like Jesus was anything special. He is just our ideal. He is our figurehead that we look at and say, that is what we are reaching for. So the two books that I got, the Friedrich Schleiermacher, his Christian Faith, it's a 2-volume set. It's a new translation and a critical edition translated by Terence Tice, Catherine Kelsey, and Edwina Lawler. I have read portions of the beginning of the preface and seen that their translation method was as critical as it can get. Published in 2016 as a 2-volume meant to replace the previous old editions. The books themselves seem well made. They're very pretty. They got just a nice plain black. They're not like cloth bound, but they are hardback, and they are published by Westminster John Knox Press. They are about 1,000 pages, so it's not too long, and I'm excited to start reading them to learn more about liberal theology, learn more about Schleiermacher, and I will definitely be making future videos on that as far as learning some of his thoughts in a more detail. Because, for example, pretty much everything I know about Schleiermacher is from this book and also from reading a little bit of Bavinck. He talks about Schleiermacher a lot, and it's obvious that he's completely against his thought, but if he cites it so much and I read it and I don't know much of Schleiermacher's original works from the primary source, it's hard to read that in good faith. I really did appreciate the Journey of Modern Theology because it did give me a lot of good information on an overview of Schleiermacher, which is how I got the information for this video. But still, in my experience, it is always best to go to the primary sources rather than a secondary source trying to tell me about an overview of someone's thought. Why not just hear it from the horse's mouth? So thankfully, I don't need to know German to do that with this new critical edition, which should be, the fonts are really nice. It's a well-made book, and I'm excited to read it, and I will definitely be making more videos on Schleiermacher in the future. So my main takeaway from at least this overview study of liberal theology of Schleiermacher is that Christianity needs to strive to answer the new questions that come out in light of modern problems. Schleiermacher and his liberalism tried to respond to a problem that had arisen out of the Enlightenment philosophy, out of the findings of modern science. It's clearly outside of Orthodox Christianity. It accommodates way too much, just way too much to modern thought. We can have conservative churches that are segregists or separatists from society because the society is changing, that society learns new things, and they're saying, well, these learnings are just the findings of man, we're going to disregard that. It's not okay. I mean, for example, the Catholic Church, and I don't have dates for all of these things, this is just off the top of my head here. The Catholic Church taught geocentrism for the longest time after and contested against the findings of heliocentrism even after it was an established fact. Just this separatist mentality of not answering the questions or addressing the problems that come up can lead to people turning away from the faith or not having a firm foundation in their faith or being the laughingstock of society when you segregate and become cult-like in your religion. So I see the problem on both sides. On one hand, we have some churches that are completely woke, like the United Methodist Church, like the PCUSA, these churches that have fully embraced the woke agenda to fully accommodate to modern society, to the woke and liberal social culture. But then on the other hand, we have conservative churches that are taking traditional stands on things that don't matter. And instead of addressing the problems that come up and fighting head on and furthering the gospel of Christ and furthering the kingdom of our Lord, they hide in a separatist shell, creating bunkers and creating just cast off societies of people that just say, well, that's of the devil, that's of Satan. We don't believe that. That's man-centered, and it's not intellectual. It's the fundamentalist problem all over again. So I hope this was helpful for you. I do enjoy making these videos. If you are still watching, please like and subscribe to the video. Comment down below. Let me know what you think of classic liberal theology. Let me know what you know, if you've read or know anything about Friedrich Schleiermacher that I failed to mention. Obviously, like I said, I'm not an expert on this. I have just recently read about it and wanted to talk about it, and I'd love to have discussions with you guys about him in the comments. So comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.